These top 24 running back rankings for 2024 fantasy football are going to pertain to your half PPR redraft leagues that you're going in with your buddies or with your college friends or whoever you're playing with on an ESPN Sleeper or Yahoo type of draft. But first, I am still giving away one free FFN hat per week to somebody who goes down there, drops a like on the video, is subscribed to the channel, and gives me their hottest take for 2024 fantasy football. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me your hottest take for 2024 fantasy football. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, and we're going to start out with our first tier of guys, and I think that some people are probably going to find this a little ridiculous, how I still have Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall in the same tier as number one, Christian McCaffrey. So with Christian McCaffrey, I don't feel like we need to talk about much. There's just really not much to say, right? Everybody expects Christian McCaffrey to get the same type of workload he did last year, and if we're going based on last year, what he did with his production, he's not going to drop off. San Francisco's offense is perfect for him. We totally expect an elite level upside again. Let's just move on with that. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is Breece Hall at this moment in time. So a couple days ago, as of the time you're watching this, we got news that the offensive coordinator over in Atlanta is saying something that is a complete nightmare for anybody who wants Bijan Robinson to get a full workload, when he said that Bijan Robinson might be sharing the backfield a little bit with, you guessed it, Tyler Algier. So Tyler Algier is back in play. All of a sudden, for us who thought it was Bijan Robinson time, right? Here's the problem that I have with the reporting. I mentioned this on my Discord when I was talking about how typically in the month of August, we start to get a lot of smoke screens and a lot of information that just isn't really relevant, just because the fantasy football news cycle just really starts to kick back up as everybody gets more involved with it again. Now, this is not necessarily insignificant news that I'm saying, but what I am saying to you is that all offseason, the head coach over there, Raheem Morris, has said, we're going to use Bijan Robinson. This offense will be centered around Bijan Robinson. So the way I look at it is this. You've got a rookie head coach with Raheem Morris, and you've got a rookie offensive coordinator with Zach Robinson, who are saying kind of two different things. The head coach is saying he's the centerpiece, and the OC is saying, yeah, we're going to kind of mix in Tyler Algier still. So the way that I rationalize this, and why he's still at 2 above Breece Hall and still in this number 1 category with Christian McCaffrey, is because I will take the head coach's word over the offensive coordinator's word. I believe the head coach will just rule over the offensive coordinator, and that's the rationale I have with it. And the more news we get, this may change, but as far as I stand today, Bijan Robinson's still at 2. And of course, no slight at all to Breece Hall. Breece Hall, I think, is in this tier because I believe he can be a running back, the running back 1 in 2024. Now, the problem that I have with Breece Hall that I don't necessarily with Bijan is that I don't think that Breece Hall is still set up for just as much success if everything hits for both of these guys. If everything hits for Bijan Robinson, I think he has the potential more so to be the running back 1 just based on the weapons that are around him. Now, with Breece Hall, obviously there's a Garrett Wilson factor in there, right? Garrett Wilson should be an elite wide receiver as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy. There's a lot hinging on those two guys, though. Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, for Breece Hall to have a legitimate threat other than himself. Look at all the other receivers there. There are a lot of kind of mid-tier guys. Allen Lazard, they've got Mike Williams. It's just not as good as Atlanta's with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So I don't think the defense is probably as on their toes as much with a Breece Hall as with Bijan Robinson. But again, we're splitting hairs here. That's why they're both in this top tier for me. Now at 4 and 5, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor here. Now with Jahmyr Gibbs, I just think that the reason I prefer him over Jonathan Taylor is when you actually look at these two guys, they're very similar in a lot of ways as far as their situations go. Now, with Jahmyr Gibbs, what's the big problem that everybody has, or some people have? The problem that some people have is that David Montgomery is going to get this goal line work in this backfield, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be nowhere to be found when it comes to red zone targets and touches. I can understand that. In fact, I agree with it. I believe David Montgomery will be the red zone guy. Now, what's the issue with the Jonathan Taylor crowd? Some people have issues with him. Well, it's that Anthony Richardson, the Russian quarterback, might do that same thing in the red zone. So they both have red zone work concerns that are related to both Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Now, here's the separating factor for me. It's that we know with Detroit's current offense, nothing has changed since 2022, really. They've got Ben Johnson as that OC for the third year now. He's run an elite, efficient offense ever since he's been that OC. They've got Jared Goff at quarterback, obviously. And then they've got two great running backs that they play the offense off of the run. And both running back has a carved out role. Jahmyr Gibbs may not get the goal line work, but we know he's going to get a bunch of touches between the 20s, and he's also going to get 4 to 5 to maybe 6 targets a game this year. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I just see more target upside as opposed to Jonathan Taylor, who I don't think will share the backfield with anybody necessarily. But what if he does get some red zone touches taken away from him from Anthony Richardson? And then you add on the rushing quarterback factor. With rushing quarterbacks, you don't get the targets. So Jonathan Taylor behind Jahmyr Gibbs is pretty firm for me. But again, we're splitting hairs here. I'm just trying to tell you guys the differences that I have and the reasons I have ranked one way or another. Now at 6 and 7, I've got Josh Jacobs consistently ahead of consensus and Saquon Barkley at 7. Now with Josh Jacobs, I've been very consistent on this all offseason with him. The reason why, if you go to Fantasy Pros and you look at what his consensus is over there, the consensus with Josh Jacobs is much lower than mine as far as their rankings go. Now, the reason I love Josh Jacobs this year, and I especially love him at cost in ESPN leagues right now. In ESPN leagues, he's like a 4th round pick. So with Josh Jacobs, the reason I love him is because not only is his price good, this is the best situation he'll be in his entire career. He's got an ascending offense that he's on now with Green Bay. Jordan Love just got signed to an extension. It's the best quarterback that he will ever play with in most likelihood. He's also got a full cast of weapons that are surrounding him, taking the pressure off of him. Josh Jacobs also has a very good offensive line with Green Bay. They lost David Bakhtiari this offseason, but this is an older guy, and their offensive line is so young, and everybody's on a rookie contract under a head coach that is a brilliant offensive mind with Matt LaFleur. I think Josh Jacobs' efficiency is going to go up this year. I think they signed him to be their guy. When you look at the contract that they gave him, they're not going to mess around with Marshawn Lloyd, who, yes, is a decent draft capital guy for them, and I actually like the prospect. But he's starting out training camp injured already. Typically not a good sign for a mid-round pick. So I'm just pretty bullish on Josh Jacobs, to be honest with you guys. And his price is also really good on Underdog. If you go to Underdog right now, you're again getting him in like the 4th or 5th round. You want to talk about winning big money? That's a guy you can win really big money with on Underdog. So if you want to jump in on an Underdog draft, go to Underdog using the link in the comments below and use code FFN, where when you deposit $10 to get in that draft, they're going to give you $250 in free bonus cash to play with. They're literally throwing free money at you to go play in a league on Underdog or do some pick'ems, whatever you want to do with it. So join Underdog today using code FFN. Now with Saquon Barkley here at 7, I think that with Saquon Barkley, I've been also very consistent on. I've taken the very unpopular take with him the entire offseason, which is that I don't believe that Saquon Barkley really has a top 3 ceiling as a lot of people do. I think Saquon Barkley is going to be much more efficient this year than he was with New York last year. I also think that Saquon Barkley's rushing touchdowns are not going to go up as high as a lot of people think. I also think that his targets are going to drop from what he got with New York. And if you look at the targets that he got with New York last year, and even the previous year, a lot of his fantasy production has come off those targets because he's been inefficient on the ground. Now, that's the Giants' fault, right? That's the Giants' fault. It's not necessarily on Saquon. He's walking into a better offensive line this year. But if you're taking away those targets and you don't get that touchdown upside with a running quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who consistently has double-digit rushing touchdowns, you don't have a top 3 ceiling. I'm sorry, it's just not the reality. So I like Saquon Barkley, but as far as his price on ESPN Sleeper Underdog drafts, I'm just really not big on it, and I've taken that unpopular approach all offseason long. Now at 8 and 9, I've got Derrick Henry and Devon Achane here. Now with Derrick Henry, obviously with the Baltimore Ravens, I don't think a lot of people are really expecting him to be that 300 carry guy that he was for years and years over in Tennessee. I don't think that's the point of taking Derrick Henry in the second round of a ESPN draft or the third round of an ESPN draft. With Derrick Henry, what I continue to emphasize with him is we're looking at a guy who easily could finish with the most rushing touchdowns in the league. If you just look at and add it all up, Derrick Henry going into the best offensive line, a top 3 offensive line in NFL. He's also got a rushing quarterback who doesn't carry the ball at the red zone. Why is Lamar Jackson different than Jalen Hurts? The reason he's different is because look at the two body types. Jalen Hurts is big. They don't worry about him getting injured at the goal line. Lamar Jackson, he's not small, but he's a lot thinner framed. So he doesn't run as much at the red zone, and you can look at his touchdown rushing totals over the years. He's not as consistently a double-digit guy. That's because they don't run him at the goal line. So you know that with the efficiency that Derrick Henry's going to see, even if he doesn't get 250 carries, if he ends up getting 15 or more rushing touchdowns, Derrick Henry's going to be a great asset in fantasy football. That's why he's ranked at 8. And with Devon Achane here, I think it's just the offensive situation that we can attribute to Miami and with their coach, Mike McDaniel, that I just love so much. And I don't really think that when we talk about Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, for example, I think some people early in the offseason thought Devon Achane is just going to take over the backfield. I don't think that's the case. I never thought it was the case. Mike McDaniel is a Kyle Shanahan disciple. So he wants to use the 2 running back system, which Kyle did for years before he got McCaffrey. So with McDaniel, he wants to use 2 running backs. And luckily he's got 2 really efficient ones. But I think Devon Achane does lead the backfield, probably gets more opportunities. And at this point in his career, is just better than Raheem Mostert. And with the offensive efficiency that they have, we all know that Miami's they're prone to big explosion games. Devon Achane has tons of upside. At 10 and 11, I've got Kyren Williams and James Cook here. So with Kyren Williams, I really found myself, when I was adjusting these rankings, wanting to move him up because I think a lot of the Blake Corum stuff could be a smokescreen. I've heard a lot about Dylan Lobb, who they drafted this year. I just can't bring myself to do it quite yet. I'm not ruling it out at some point in the next couple weeks or month that Kyren Williams could easily shoot up to like number 6 in front of Josh Jacobs. But right now, I'm going to stick with him at 10. Kyren Williams, I still hold the belief that there's no way that the Rams can justify subtracting like 5 to more opportunities per game for him because of how elite he was last year. This was not some run-of-the-mill season where they could easily replace Kyren Williams, even though he had a decent season. Kyren Williams was elite last year. So as far as being a top 10 back, it's pretty much a no-brainer for me. It's really just down to how high. Is he top 5 potential? As of right now, I'm going to hold back at number 10. And with James Cook here, I actually ended up moving him up. And James Cook, the reason why is because I really do think he's bust-proof. I don't think that James Cook will bust because of the Buffalo offense providing so much leverage and efficiency through Josh Allen, right? So Josh Allen obviously loses Stephon Diggs, but Josh Allen, the point being, is very similar to Jalen Hurts, going to get a lot of running work, which will keep defenses on their toes with James Cook. So with James Cook, going to be super efficient this year, probably won't get a bunch of rushing touchdowns, but you know what he will get? He will get targets out of the backfield because Josh Allen, make no mistake, is a running quarterback, but he does prefer to save his body at some points in the game, which is why James Cook's target totals are typically higher than most running backs with rushing quarterbacks. So I don't think James Cook busts in this good of an offense. Now at 12 and 13, I've got Isaiah Pacheco and I've got Travis Etienne. Now with Isaiah Pacheco, again, he bumped up a spot because there's a guy who moved down. With Pacheco, I also don't really think he's going to bust at his spot because I think that Isaiah Pacheco, there's really not much new that really evolved from 2023 that I can attribute to getting like a much higher ranking than this. But we do know that the situation, it doesn't really get a ton better. Obviously, with Kansas City's offense, this situation is elite. Patrick Mahomes provides the ultimate amount of balance to this offense, and it just leaves Isaiah Pacheco being an efficient running back. And they don't really have any realistic competition. So Isaiah Pacheco continues to get the workload that he got last year. I don't think that really changes much. So I really don't see him moving too much up or down. And then with Travis Etienne, also been a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I've been tracking this one all off season. Last year I called him a league winner. And in fact, he was a top 3 guy, and you were drafting him in like the 3rd or 4th round in underdog in ESPN drafts. So largely was right on Travis Etienne last year. I've been tracking it all offseason though, and Doug Peterson, the head coach over there, has consistently said all offseason, yeah, we want to limit his touches a little bit. We want Tank Bigsby to be more involved. So, like, he's outlining it right in front of you what he wants to do. He wants to give Travis Etienne less work, and the reason why is because he wasn't that efficient running the ball last year. So that doesn't surprise me at all that he wants to limit his touches, because if you look back to Etienne's second year, well, he had limited touches and he was super efficient. So it makes sense why he wants to do it. And I don't think that Etienne's a bad player in fantasy this year. I just think his ranking's a little bit higher than I prefer him, and that's why he's at 13. 14 and 15. Rashad White and David Montgomery here. Now, Rashad White finally lands. The last time I did these rankings, he was actually at 11. And I swear, Rashad White is the guy that I just can't figure out exactly how I feel. Just to be completely transparent, because transparency is a big deal to me. Rashad White, there's one part of me that's like, okay, he was a 350 opportunity guy last year and was a top 10 running back in fantasy football. And they didn't really add any legitimate competition to the backfield this offseason. So it looks like all systems go for Rashad White. He also strikingly fits the criteria for an unexpected league-winning running back. Then there's the other side of me that says the inefficiency. I just cannot shake this, and I've been on it for a year. The inefficiency with this guy leaves me wondering what kind of workload will be there without Dave Canales this year as the offensive coordinator. So I just can't pinpoint how I feel about him, which is why I had to drop him a little bit, because I really do feel like Rashad White has a relatively stable floor, but I think that his ceiling is really high. So there's this range for me where it's like, I think he has a top 15 floor, but I think his ceiling is somewhere in the top 5, and I can't pinpoint exactly where I want to put him right now. That's why he's at 14. Now, David Montgomery at 15, I really think it's so crazy how for years and years, ever since he was with Detroit last year, this is the second year in a row where I've had to come out and explain David Montgomery is an elite pick in fantasy football drafts where you get him. I don't care if it's ESPN, Sleeper, Underdog. I've drafted on all those this offseason already. He's a great pick everywhere. David Montgomery is going to get the goal line work. So you know that rushing touchdown total, over 10 last year. The other thing about that is, did you remember that he missed several games last year? David Montgomery did over 12 rushing touchdowns last year, and he missed several games. So David Montgomery is in the perfect situation for him because he's not going to have to carry the workload, because he's kind of shown he's not that guy. But in this efficient of an offense, with this great of an offensive line, number 1 ranked, by the way, by Pro Football Network, David Montgomery is an elite pick in fantasy football drafts. Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara at 16 and 17. With Kenneth Walker, I really do think that the ultimate problem here, that I'm not alone in. I think a lot of people have woken up to this one this offseason. Kenneth Walker obviously has a Zach Charbonnet problem. And it's not his fault necessarily, because I think Kenneth Walker is the better player. And I think most people would agree with that. The problem is they spent a 2nd round pick on him last year. So you know they're going to get him more involved this season. It just makes no sense to lessen his workload. And even if his workload's the same, this is around where Kenneth Walker kind of belongs. So I'm actually kind of ranking Kenneth Walker at a ceiling here, as depressing as it sounds. And then with Alvin Kamara, I really, really, really do have a strong feeling that the Saints offense this year is going to be one of the worst. And there is history that links bad offenses to bad fantasy football production at the running back position. Alvin Kamara is also close to 30. There's just too many bad warning signs for me right now. Although I do see the upside obviously from a player like him, did well last year when he played, and is obviously going to get targets. I really do have a feeling that the Saints offense is going to plummet this year, and that alone just scares me off of Alvin Kamara, to be honest with you guys. Joe Mixon at 18 and James Conner at 19. Joe Mixon, I feel very similarly to Alvin Kamara. Joe Mixon is in a offense that is so much better than the Saints, right? They're going to be a top 10 offense. But the similarities here are obviously with age. The age factor is a problem with Joe Mixon. Now, I know a lot of people will say Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon both were good fantasy options last year. That's 100% true. But Joe Mixon is coming into a team that is going to be pass first. Make no mistake about this one. He's also coming into a team that has flirted with the idea all offseason, by the way, that they might use a 2 running back system. We will see how that goes when we get to September, but I'm telling you right now, he's starting out training camp injured. That's just not a good sign for his longevity during the full season with a player of his age. So I really am kind of advising everybody, stay away from Joe Mixon, but I do still think that obviously with the offense that he's on, he still has to be inside the top 20 just because this offense will be so good. So when he does play, I do believe he will be efficient. Now at 19 with James Conner, it's the guy that's very similar to Rashad White for me. I can't pinpoint him down. I like him sometimes, and I don't like him. I've largely come around to him just because he's been so efficient with Arizona. Arizona, this is the perfect system for him. And I get it, Arizona is just drafted Trey Benson this offseason, who I like a lot. But I do think that it will be a year until we see the real Trey Benson's upside. I think James Conner is still going to be really good. Just look at his numbers on a per-game basis right now. He was super efficient last year, is getting in the end zone plenty, and this is just a guy who maybe misses a couple games per season, but a running back 19 finish is so easily attainable, even if he does miss 3 or 4 games, just because of how efficient he will be in this Arizona Cardinals offense. At 20 and 21, I've got Zach Moss and Raheem Mostert here. Now, Zach Moss is going to be top 20 for me, again, really because of the team that he's on. With Cincinnati, I actually think it's very similar to Houston, where I think they're going to be pass first. I think Joe Burrow obviously will lead this offense, and without Joe Mixon there, I don't think that Zach Moss is going to be some 20 carry guy. I actually think Chase Brown could be very involved this year. But when I look at Zach Moss and the contract that they gave him more guaranteed money than Chase Brown is even worth in his contract. So I just don't believe the notion that Zach Moss is going to be the total backup. As of right now, when we sit here today, and if Zach Moss is the guy in this backfield who leads it, this offense is just too good for him to not be good. Zach Moss is a guy who did very well on another efficient offense last year without a star quarterback. So put the star quarterback in there, makes him that much more efficient. And I think Zach Moss, as long as he leads the backfield, and again, we'll monitor this one throughout the weeks, Zach Moss is a very good pick. Now, with Raheem Mostert, again, with Miami, the offense is perfect. Mike McDaniel's the coach over there. The offensive system's great. The zone run scheme fits Mostert perfectly. Now, I struggle with Mostert because of age. The age is just, you cannot ignore the age. He's 32 years old, coming off the only season where he played basically the entire year. So what are the chances he does it again? Low, but obviously the ceiling is really high. So I'm, again, trying to put him closer to his floor right now, with the caveat of telling you guys, I think Mostert has tons of upside. We just need to play it a little bit smart with him. Now, the last tier right here is rounded out by Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, and Zamir White. Now, Tony Pollard, I want to rank him higher. There's a reason why, and that's because I believe that Tennessee is one of the biggest sleeper offenses in the entire league. I think Tennessee could very well be a top 10 offense. I'm not predicting it, but I think that they have made all the moves to go in that direction. If Tony Pollard hits his upside, I think it's somewhere in that top 12 range. Now, I do believe that Tyjae Spears will be more involved this year than he was last year. So I am going to leave some window for error there with Tony Pollard. And obviously, if the offense doesn't work out, Tony Pollard won't be probably even the running back 22. So Tony Pollard, I like him. I think he's pretty high upside. And of course, when you're drafting in fantasy football, you're trying to go for the upside. And then with Aaron Jones, I just really like the offense, obviously, with Minnesota, but there's just a reality with Aaron Jones is that his workload, he just can't handle that much more. He just can't really handle much more on a per-game basis than he got last year. It's just a fact. He's just been injured quite a bit lately, and he's obviously an older guy. And coming into a contract year with all of his contract guaranteed, that's great. I don't doubt that he'll lead the backfield, but I do doubt the ability to stay on the field with Aaron Jones, and I very rarely predict injuries. But Aaron Jones, I kind of feel like is on the safer side of maybe predicting an injury this year. Could be totally wrong, and he might blow through this ranking right here. This is just a gut feeling I have. Now, with Zamir White, want to rank him higher, fits the criteria of an unexpected league-winning running back. I just hate the Raiders' offense this year. Gardner Minshew does not excite me at all. Offense is kind of stale a little bit, now missing Josh Jacobs. And I think Zamir White did obviously very well filling in for Josh Jacobs last year. But this offensive line is not my favorite. The quarterback, I think, is really going to hurt them this year. So I just really think that the Raiders are going to struggle to be in a lot of big scoring games. And that is definitely going to hurt Zamir White because I think the defense will be keeping them in a lot of low-scoring games, and Zamir White is probably going to suffer as a result in fantasy football. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below, and if you want to see the top 24 wide receiver rankings for 2024, click on this video right here.